Cade should be the #1 guy. There's no doubt in my mind. My nickname for Cade is "Don't Overthink It." So, and the Pistons just need to not overthink it.
Bad night for Chicago. Bad night for OKC, who slipped a few spots, but great night for the Detroit Pistons, who won the #1 pick and therefore the rights in theory to Cade Cunningham. I have seen a couple places. I know Sam Vecini of The Athletic said he isn't 100% sold, that they're like guaranteed to go with him. And Jonathan Tjarks of The Ringer had a piece up today about, you know, should they pivot in a different direction considering they took Killian Hayes last year at #7. So that's where I wanted to start, Mort. Cade, from everything I've seen, has been the clear-cut consensus #1 pick all year. Is he a guy who's so good and so far ahead of the rest of the class that you disregard, this, you know, from Detroit's perspective? You don't care that you spent #7 on Killian Hayes last year because Cade is better. Yeah. And if Killian can't fit with him, you'll figure that like you can trade him later, but you're not going to cost yourself Cade Cunningham because you have Killian Hayes.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. Like, in the grand scheme of things, and Pistons fans, I know you're watching, I know you're listening in, understand what I'm saying here. Right now, because of this pick, Killian Hayes becomes sort of irrelevant. What I mean by that is not that he is irrelevant, that his development is irrelevant. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if he doesn't hit, if he doesn't pop, it doesn't matter, because you will now have Cade Cunningham, who will take over ball handling duties, who will be your primary lead guard, who will be your primary decision maker. So right now, if Killian Hayes should end up becoming a bust, I don't think he will be, but if he should be, then it just won't matter. Like, his development is of course important. I want him to succeed. The Pistons want him to succeed, but if it doesn't, by whatever reason, it's fine, because they have Cade now. And I don't think they should pivot into something else. I think that is baloney. I think they have their minds made up already. They just want to do their due diligence. They want to talk to him. They want to make sure all of the medical stuff is right. They want to talk like background and, you know, all the things. But Cade should be the #1 guy. There's no doubt in my mind. My nickname for Cade is "Don't Overthink It." So, and the Pistons just need to not overthink it. And of course, like, the best possible situation here is that they draft Cade and Killian Hayes comes back with a vengeance in year 2. That would be just fantastic for the Pistons.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, you know, we've seen teams in recent years have prioritized having multiple ball handlers on the floor. Right. You can never have too many guys who can dribble and pass. So in some ways, could Cade be good for Killian's development in that Killian's not going to have the ball in his hands all the time? You can lean on Cade as a playmaker as well. They can kind of split those playmaking duties.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing with Killian coming into last year. You know, you and I talked about it earlier this year and before the draft last year. So Killian went from France to Germany for a variety of reasons, and he made a name in Germany because that is not an athletic league. He was able to get to his spots a lot quicker, a lot better, a lot more efficiently than he did in France. And France is one of the most athletic leagues outside of the NBA. So there was some concerns there. I spoke to European coaches and I spoke to people in my network over here who basically summed up and said, yeah, he really benefited from going to Germany. That raised his draft stock, and NBA teams could be, I'm not saying they will be, but they could be disappointed just by him not having the athletic prowess. But he's a smart player. He's got a lot of potential as a pull-up shooter. He's got a lot of potential as a shooter, generally speaking. He can read the floor. So having him being able to progress at his own pace next to someone like Cade Cunningham, who is going to just he's gonna hit the ground running. He's already my rookie of the year pick. He's that good. So for Killian to be able to feed off of that attention, I think is only going to do him well. There's going to be less pressure on him. He's going to be able to take more spot up jumpers. I think the confidence level of Killian Hayes is going to go through the roof by playing with Cade. I can just not see this be a bad thing by any stretch. And if it turns out to be a bad thing, then it's all on Killian, I would say, because Cade is that guy. Like, Cade is that guy. You have to adapt your mindset to understanding this guy is basically the US version of Luka. Like, that's just the way it is. So you need to adapt to him. Like, if Killian has that mindset, oh, here's another guy who's going to come in and help me. Yeah, no, you have to help Cade. You have to build around him. And I think if Killian accepts that right off the bat, he's in for a much, much better future.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you look at their young core, and I'm including Jeremy Grant, even though he's not technically, he's 27 already, but
right.
Part of their rebuild, I should say.
Yeah.
You're like, this is a really interesting, versatile starting five they can have with now Killian, Cade, Saddiq Bey, Jeremy, and then Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah.
Like, if we're talking about positionless NBA, this is, I mean, you have multiple ball handlers. You're lacking in terms of floor spacing. You have Saddiq, who's great, and then Jeremy will at least take those shots, but he's not a super efficient three-point shooter. Cade's actually pretty good in that regard, right?
Yes, he is very good, both as a pull-up shooter and as a standstill shooter. He started the year off a little bit slow, so people got nervous about just his shooting acumen, but then he started feeling a little bit more relaxed, and those shots just started popping. And what was really impressive was he did not play with great teammates. So that just means that he was able to get off those three-point shots and hit them at over 40% from downtown without actually having the spacing to do so. He would just dribble into his spots. He would find the right spots when moving off the ball. I love how this guy's mental makeup is. I don't think that he's going to come in straight away and be someone who takes 9 threes per game and hits them at 40+% necessarily, but he is a guy who has that potential. Like, right off the bat, he should be maybe a slightly above shooter compared to other NBA wings, and then he'll progress ever so slightly every single year when he then reaches the point of being absolutely elite. There's a lot of shooting potential there, a lot of playmaking potential, and for people who really haven't watched Cade Cunningham a lot, they're going to be pointing to the 3.5 assists and going, oh, that's pretty modest. Again, I cannot overemphasize the lack of quality around him this year. It was bad. He just did not have a whole lot of high skilled players alongside him. He had to do most of the damage himself. That's just not a recipe where you can rack up assists. And also worth noting, NCAA, that's not really a high assist league or a high assist system. Like, you rarely see college players come out and average a hell of a lot of assists because you're facing zone defenses, the ball is passing around. It's certainly not professional basketball, if you catch my drift. It's very like read and react, see defense, and that and offense as well. So that makes it a little bit different. I am not concerned about the passing at all. This is a guy who can come into the league and probably average 5 assists right off the bat.
If he's used to playing with bad teammates, he'll love Detroit.
I mean, look, you brought up Jeremy Grant and you brought up Saddiq Bey. I think those two guys are actually going to accelerate Cade's development, just because if he came to a team where he had nothing, where he would be asked to once again do everything, I think that could actually hurt him. But for him to have a Jeremy Grant and a Saddiq Bey to pass the ball to, and Killian Hayes if he's up for it, that's not bad. That is not bad.
I was totally kidding. I actually like this young group that the Pistons have assembled here. So I guess
don't kid about that. Last time we did a Pistons video, remember all the bad
Oh yeah,
all the bad coaches. No, we were totally complimentary about the Pistons, and Pistons fans were like, "What is wrong with you?" I never understood that.
No, I really think the Pistons have, especially after winning the Cade lottery, like, this is a huge boon for this franchise. They're going to be relevant again, which is always great to see. Before we move to number 2, we know so Cade number 1 with a bullet.
Yes.
Is there any world wherein the Pistons should consider trading this pick?
I mean, my natural first instinct is no, but I mean, look, if Oklahoma City comes in and says, we'll give you Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and like 2 or 3 like unprotected first rounders, like let's say number 6 this year, and like a couple other picks that are projected to go really, really high. I mean, then you have to think about it, but they're not going to do that, I don't think. I would be shocked, and yeah. I don't know. I mean, that if anything, that would be the deal. Like, that would be the deal. That is, if it's like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a lot of picks. Like, that I could maybe see have some legs, because you already know there's a certain baseline in quality with Shai. Like, it's not all draft picks. Or like, you know, Zion. Like, we actually brought that up, remember? We talked about, like, a Cade Zion thing. I don't think that's on the table at all anymore. They already have Jeremy Grant. Like, why would they? It doesn't fit there, and they need a guy like Cade. So I would be shocked if they trade this pick. Absolutely shocked.
Yeah, I would be too. But I just wanted to at least float it out there, because I think you're right. Especially given Cade's ties to the Oklahoma area. Yeah. You know, some sort of deal if like OKC was really nervous about maxing out SGA. I guess that's possible, but I don't think they should be. And you know, they have the ammunition to get into any star trade if they want. Yeah. And Cade is probably, you know, he's the caliber of prospect who you should at least call about. But I think you're right that Detroit will set such an astronomical price that OKC will just be like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah. I will say could be interesting for both teams. I know that right now Pistons fans are riding this Cade Cunningham high, and I totally get it. But it would be interesting to see just how much you could squeeze that lemon. Like if that conversation goes, well, we'll give you SGA, and well, we'll also give you number 6, and well, we'll also give you, and just see how far you can push it. If that ends up being like Shai, number 6, and 2 or 3 unprotected first rounders down the line, I might do that. I mean, that because then you're just getting so much value in return that you just have to sort of pull it, I think, and just say, you know what, that is so much that we don't even care if Cade becomes the next Luka, because we have Shai, and then we have so many more bites at the apple. We have number 6. We have 2 or 3 unprotected first rounders coming in that are protected to be high. Like, yeah, I could see that. That could be interesting. It would be interesting for Oklahoma City too. Like, just because of they have all these assets. And honestly, I think this is interesting, because if they can trade for Cade, then they could also trade for Evan Mobley. Like, I think, like, would it be weird if Oklahoma City just basically said, you know what? Let's blow our load. Let's trade for Cade Cunningham and Evan Mobley. And hell, if we have enough picks remaining, let's go for Jalen Suggs as well.
just get the, I mean, yeah, they have, what, 18 first-round picks in the next 7 years? So, yeah, just spend the ball on the top 3 guys this year. It'll be great.
That would be fun. Like, you and I would agree. Draft night, if that happened on draft night.
Oh, God. That'd be wild.
It would be fantastic. I would enjoy that so much. Of course, a complete pipe dream, but yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you brought up Evan Mobley, so we should move to the Houston Rockets, who won the number 2 pick. The Cade dreams died. But, I mean, number 2 is not the worst place to be if you're Houston. It seems like Mobley, from most of the big boards I've seen, is more or less a consensus number 2. Would you go that route here if you're Houston?
Yeah, absolutely. He's the clear number 2. Some people are actually saying that he should be considered for number 1. That's where I think that's where I think that the group tank or the hive minds kind of just run off the rail a little bit. I think he's the clear number 2, though. Absolutely. He's a guy who can pass, he can shoot, he can defend at a high level, he can board. There is a very strong possibility that he's a guy you can actually run your offense through, which I think is very interesting. He's got a very high shot release as well. He's not someone who will get blocked a whole lot. The thing that I want to see a little bit more from him is just in terms of the physicality. He is very, very slim. Not necessarily a bad thing, because he is what I call Kevin Durant slim. Like, he's got some strength still to him, even though he looks like someone who really needs a big meal, but he's strong. Like, he is strong, and I think that frame can absolutely carry 20 to 40 pounds easy. I don't think that's a problem. As he fills out, I think he's going to be more and more dominant. I like to basically say that Evan Mobley is probably going to be everything that Kristaps Porzingis should have been.
Oof. Ouch. How do you see him fitting with Christian Wood, if at all?
I'm not one of those guys who'll say, "Oh, you need to trade someone immediately," because if they figure something out and it works, okay, that's cool. I do think in this day and age, it seems unlikely that they will figure something out, because who runs a too big system?
Right.
That said, I'm also not going to sit here and say that a Mobley at center, Wood at power forward situation or whatever, it's interchangeable now, but just too big system won't work. Wood is extremely efficient. He's a strong rebounder. He can shoot from outside. Mobley can do the same. They're very interchangeable. Wood isn't a strong defender. Mobley is. So I would probably basically say that, okay, Mobley, you are the second option of the two offensively, but you are a primary defender because you can block shots, you can rotate over, you can do a bunch of these stuff that Wood really can't do. And then Christian, you go take care of the offense. You go for 25 a game, and then Mobley will sort of play off of you in that sense. But that is a very like David Robinson, Tim Duncan kind of thing, and that was back in 1997, so I'm not really sure that approach works anymore. But I think you still need to go Mobley in this case. Like, I have seen Rockets fans go, well, we'll just take Jalen Suggs. Yeah, you could. No, I'm not down on Suggs. I love Jalen Suggs. We'll get to it, but I still think Mobley is the guy you might want in this scenario. I'm not going to close the door on Suggs having the better career. Maybe he just lands on a team and hits the ground running to an extent we didn't really imagine. But I just like the overall skill set of Mobley to an extent where I'm willing to say that he should be the number 2 pick.
Yeah. And I mean, much like Detroit with Killian, I don't want to say like Evan Mobley makes Christian Wood irrelevant, because that's not the case. Christian Wood's really good, would have probably made the All-Star team if he didn't get hurt halfway through the year. But when they signed Christian Wood, they still had James Harden, and they signed him thinking we're in a win now window. Now clearly you are not. Right. Christian Wood is signed for 2 more years at a very reasonable rate, but by the time the Rockets get back into any semblance of contention, they're going to have to that contract will have expired already.
Yeah.
So this actually feels like the perfect opportunity to shop Christian Wood, who on that contract in particular should have enormous value around the league. And this could be a chance to bolster your ongoing rebuild.
Who knew that Christian Wood would have tremendous value around the league, huh? Wow.
I mean, on what, 13, 14, less than 14 million a year?
Yeah.
Like, if he's paid 25 million a year, I don't know if he has the value he does, but at
that
14
was an insane deal. Like, I didn't understand it when it came out. And remember, it was actually reported initially as being lower than that. And then, and even then it was like 3 years, 41 million, and you just went, is that all?
Right. What? Yeah. Didn't it originally come out as like 3 years, 28, and it was right after?
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
Mason Plumlee to a similar deal. I was like, what?
Yeah. No, it was 327, which made people say it was the non-tax MLE money.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. That is no, but you're right. And you know what? We actually talked about this a little bit before on an earlier episode. Like, might be the best time to trade Wood just because he's in the prime and because he's on such a fantastic deal. Like, the Rockets don't have a lot of assets. They really don't. They don't have a lot of great pieces that they can get a whole lot for. Christian Wood is one. Draft Evan Mobley, and if you think that trading Christian is the best course of action, go for it. And I would say get picks. Don't go for another veteran. Get draft picks. Yeah.
The two that came to mind right away for me were Sacramento and Charlotte. Like, Sacramento could do number 9 and Bagley. Or Charlotte could do like number 11 and PJ Washington, something like that.
I wouldn't do the Kings deal.
Yeah, especially because you have to pay Bagley right away.
And I don't think Bagley's that guy. Like, he's one of those on my power forward list where he can't defend, he can't shot create for himself or others. He's not a great rebounder. I just think eventually he's going to find himself on all these bargain bin lists where you can have him for 2 years, 10 million at some point.
What about New Orleans?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's not a lot of defense.
10,
yeah.
Number 10, and take your pick of probably Steven Adams, because what's the point of having him on your roster if you have Christian Wood?
And Kyra Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. Yeah, they'd have to throw more if you're extending back. But yeah, I mean, they have enough interesting young guys that it's worth for if you're Houston taking a flyer on.
I like that one, actually. Kyra Lewis, Steven Adams, and 10 for Christian Wood. So the Rockets leave this draft with number 2 and 10 in the lottery.
Mm-hmm. And you have,
that's not bad.
You're getting Mobley. You have Kevin Porter Jr. You have Kyra Lewis now.
Yeah.
Whoever you get at 10. Like, it's, I don't know. I think they have options. I think the draft actually broke pretty well in terms of team needs, potentially. Although I guess that brings us to our next team, number 3, the Cleveland Cavaliers, because they might be the one exception to that rule. So I mean, it seems like there's a clear, from what I can tell, there's almost a clear top 4 now. It seems like Kuminga has dropped a little bit, probably because, you know, his shooting percentages were so bad in the G League. So it seems like it's Cade number 1, Mobley pretty well consensus number 2, and then Jalen, Suggs, Jalen Green 3 and 4 in some order.
Yes, correct.
So for the Cavs, who have Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, would you lean Green over Suggs just in terms of fitting into your current core?
Right.
Or are either of those guys or both of those guys better than Sexton and Garland, and we're back to a Cade situation where it's like you should disregard who you have on your roster, just take the best damn guy?
That's a difficult question. I don't think we have enough knowledge yet of whether or not they're better than Sexton specifically. I mean, this is a guy who averaged 24 points per game, so I'm not sleeping on him. I do think that Jalen Green projects as someone who eventually is going to average 25 points. This is just a scorer. Like, this is a guy who can come in and basically function as a Colin Sexton, but 5 inches taller. I had the pleasure of talking to Kevin Tiller, who is the director of operations over at the G League Ignite team at my day job. That's a webinar that's coming out at some point soon. And like, I was asking him about Jalen Green and his athleticism. I was asking him, what's the sickest dunk that Jalen Green has thrown down? And he was talking about how he would get his chin over the rim.
Wow.
Like, that's the type of athleticism that we're talking about here. And when you combine that type of athleticism with shooting prowess and the fact that he's someone who can create off the dribble for himself, at the very least, you're talking about someone who can get the ball in the basket, like nonstop. This is a guy who compares very favorably to someone like Zach LaVine, for example, someone who has that trajectory of, 16 points, 18 points, then 22, then 25, then late 20s. Like, he's that type of talent. So if you want to go that route at number 3, you can, and then you can find some way to pivot off of Sexton, which, that might be the play. I don't know. The way you can kind of look at it as well is maybe you take this concept that is Colin Sexton and Jalen Green, who are somewhat comparable in skill set, and you just say, well, now we have a new rookie deal, instead of getting the extension and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then Suggs is he's a combo. Like, he can play the point, he can play the 2, and he's just relentless. Like, he's such a downhill player. I mean, you gotta love it. So if they go with him, you can essentially play both him, Garland, and Sexton 32 minutes per game with this three guard rotation where they back each other up and play multiple positions. That could work as well. But I really don't know what the Cavaliers are going to do here. But because, yes, the 2 best players at that point in time, they're guards. And their 2 primary players are guards. So I don't know if that's a decision. Maybe Maybe they pick Jalen Green and run him as their 3-man. Who knows? Maybe that's something they could do. But yeah, they might have some decisions to make. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think there's not that it would be necessarily their permanent starting 5, but could you do Garland, Sexton, Green, and then Okoro and Jared Allen as your center?
That would be fun. I mean, I really think that is a couple of years away from being, dangerous. But at the very least, right off the bat, that would be a fun team. I mean, you would have all the scoring in the world. You will have Okoro, who at least is, and Jared Allen, both of whom can defend. You won't have a whole lot of offensive production from Okoro, but you may not need it initially because you have Sexton, Garland, and Green taking care of the offense. I don't hate that. I don't know what Cavs fans think about that. I know that some of them aren't necessarily high on using Okoro as a small ball 5 for whatever reason. And I think a lot of these Cavs fans also had envisioned, picking 5th so they could take Kuminga, who would just slot right into that one. But this isn't a bad situation to be in. And I would probably personally lean Suggs in this scenario. But that's me. I think he's the number 3 guy on this board. That's where I'm at. He's just such a downhill player who can really feed off of players with a substantial skill set. We saw that at Gonzaga. Like, he had Corey Kispert alongside him. He had one of the best rosters in college basketball, and he did so well alongside talent, which means he should hit the ground running in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen from Cavs fans, they're mostly just hoping Houston doesn't take Mobley at 2, and they're hoping Mobley slips to them at 3. Yeah. But I haven't seen... I mean, it's early still, but, people are going to...
If that happens, that's a slam dunk for Cleveland. I mean, if Evan Mobley falls to 3, we're looking at a wild situation.
At that point, do you, try to sign and trade Jared Allen elsewhere?
Yes, that one I can say pretty good. Like, one thing is with Christian Wood, because he can sort of slide in between positions and both of them are interchangeable. I don't think that's the case with Jared Allen. Yeah, I would try to see if he could make it sign and trade scenario, absolutely. And then I would just give the primary big spot to Evan Mobley, and I'll say, this is yours. Do with it whatever you want. Fill out your body over the next coming years. You're going to get as many touches as you want at the elbows or the post or wherever the hell you want your shots, and from downtown, whatever. Yes, give him the ball and get the hell out of his way.
Yeah, the Cavs, I think, are going to be... Well, I mean, Houston's technically the inflection point if they pass on Mobley. But if the board goes Cunningham, Mobley, the Cavs at number 3 is where the draft starts to get really interesting, just because, Suggs and Green both don't really fill a need necessarily, or based on their current roster composition. So how the Cavs adjust there will be really
trade down. They could trade down. Now they have an argument. I mean, look, if you're in the top 4... and you want to trade out of that, you can get substantially more than if you were had the 6th pick and wanted to trade down, because the crop of players are just that one more attractive. So if the Cavs said, you know what, we want to trade down, looking at Tankathon right now, to Orlando. No, Orlando at 5, or Jonathan Kuminga, for example, because he fits that lineup. Okay. You can slide down 2 spots and you can pick up something really interesting, because they would have to give up something, something good. I don't know if it's Cole Anthony or something else. I mean, Magic fans right now be like, no, we don't want to do that, but that I don't know. But you catch my drift. You can get assets in that regard. Yeah,
or OKC has a billion picks. Slide down to 6 and get a future first from them, or get 16 and 18 from them as well. The Cavs are going to have options here. I'm excited to see how they sort this out over the next few weeks.
OKC is going to be in on all the trade-up talk for the next month.
For the next 7 years.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to Toronto at 4, who jumped up 3 spots. It feels like they're just in the perfect position where it's just whichever of Mobley, Suggs, or Green fall to them, just take that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I am Toronto, though, I am hoping that the Cavs go Jalen Green.
And you want Suggs?
Yeah, because Kyle Lowry is 87 years old. He's still good, but he is 87,000 years old.
Well, he's a free agent, more importantly.
And he's a free agent, exactly. If you get Jalen Suggs in there, that's a young backcourt with him and Gary Trent. You have OG, who's also on a similar timeline. Like, there's a lot to like there. And he's going to come in right off the bat and ready to just run that team. I think that could be interesting. So if I'm Toronto, I'm definitely hoping that the guy who slips to me is Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, I'm going to write about it for next week. I was already planning to write about why the Raptors should move on from Lowry this offseason. But now, especially given what happened in the lottery, I mean, you can run out, like, regardless of which of Suggs or Green falls to them. Because I don't think Mobley's falling to 4. But if he does, absolute home run, given their need at the center. But
that would be ridiculous.
Regardless of which Suggs or Green fall, you had Fred VanVleet, whoever you take at number 4, you have Gary Trent, you have OG, you have Pascal, and then you're still going to have about $14 million in cap space as well.
Yep.
If Lowry walks. So you can spend that to address your hole at center. I'm not saying, go wild and like spend all that on Andre Drummond or something like that, but we brought up Daniel Tice a number of times, like a Nerlens Noel even. A Robin Lopez. Like, it doesn't have to be a super expensive guy. It just Kem Birch, who played really well for them after they picked him up, but I think they only have non-bird rights on him. So if they want to retain him, they're actually going to need either cap space or one version of the mid-level exception. They can, if they keep Lowry, they could spend the non-taxpayer on that. But, I think if you have that core group and then you have $14 million to address the center spot and you have the room mid-level, like, Toronto's in a really good place all of a sudden where, they are retooling. I don't think that core with a rookie next year is going to be in the top tier title contenders.
There's a reason I didn't mention Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, Bryan.
Oh, you're out?
Oh, no, not out. No, these are fantastic players. I'm just saying that now that you have the 4th pick, that opens a world of possibilities.
Yeah.
I mean, we already talked on this podcast about a trade where that Pascal Siakam could be sent to the Golden State Warriors, for example, where you got back James Wiseman, you got back the Minnesota pick, which, by the way, is going to convey this year. That's going to be number 7. So maybe there's a deal there. We know that the Knicks, they absolutely love Fred VanVleet. They have all the cap space in the world. They can absorb him and they can send just picks back if that's what you want, and Emmanuel Quickly or something along those lines. I'm not saying they should, but the reason I didn't mention those names is because I think this opens a door for a rebuild, but maybe not a rebuild that takes a lot of time, because you can get a lot for these two guys if you're willing to move on from Fred and Pascal. And I'm not saying that they should. So don't get upset, Raptors fans. I'm not saying. I'm just saying explore every avenue. That's what I'm saying. And if you have a Jalen Suggs there, and you have a Gary Trent, and you have an OG Anunoby, then why not add a James Wiseman and the 7th pick? Why not add whatever picks you can get from New York down the line? I mean, look, they overachieved this year. That doesn't mean they're going to necessarily overachieve in the coming years, even if they trade for Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, and they can also sign and trade Kyle Lowry to get more stuff.
There you go.
So, yeah, like, they're going to be a really interesting team. Draft-wise, not necessarily, because I think their decision's pretty easy. Just take whichever one of these guys falls. But, like, whether they keep Lowry or let him go, whether they sign and trade him, how they pivot, how this pick, I mean, I feel like this pick might influence their decision on Lowry, especially if Suggs falls to them.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you have your in-house Kyle Lowry replacement. He becomes less essential to retain, and then, maybe you go from there. So the Orlando Magic ended up with the number 5 and number 8 picks.
Yep.
So we're talking, teams that might trade up. They certainly have the ammunition.
They do.
At 5, would you go Kuminga, who seems like earlier in the year, he seemed to be, it was like a Cade at the top, and then Mobley, Green, Suggs, and Kuminga was in that conversation as well.
Right.
Feels like he's dropped a little bit since then, but is he still like the pretty clear number 5 option? And do you think he would be a good fit in Orlando, or would you go elsewhere?
I mean, me personally, I like Kuminga. I think highly of him. I think the shooting percentages were unfortunate, but I also recognize that he's 18 years old. Right. I cannot sit here and say, someone who, when he played, wasn't even 18 and a half years old, by the way. He was a raw 18. Like, he was a young 18 when he started playing. And I just can't sit here in good conscience and say, oh, he should have performed so much better at that age. The guy still put up 16 and 7 per game. He can still pass the ball, like almost 3 assists per game as well. His body at that age, Bryan, we need to talk about this because I don't think a lot of people are really spending a lot of time talking about Jonathan Kuminga's physique. Like, he is 6'8" and he is chiseled, he is athletic, like his body is far more advanced than players of his age normally. I think that matters. That means that the physical nature of growth and all that is going to be less of an issue for him at the NBA level. It's more of, he can focus on skill. He won't have to spend so many additional hours in the weight room and all of that. Like, the body is pretty much set, and he's athletic, he's long, he's agile, and for whatever reason, people seem to be down on him, where I can't stop thinking, what is it that we all are looking for in draft? We're looking at this 6'8" small forward, power forward who can play multiple positions, handle the ball, and pass, right? Like, that's really what we're all looking for. What is it Jonathan Kuminga can do? Oh, those exact things. And here's the thing. His shot isn't broken. Yeah, he didn't hit the 3 at a high rate, but you know what? That shot isn't broken. It's a little bit flat, sure. But you can't sit here and tell me that shot is broken or can't be fixed just because it's a little flat. Kawhi Leonard's shot is still flat. He's hitting it at a very reasonable rate. I don't think that's a big issue. I think the Jonathan Kuminga hate or an anti-agenda, whatever you want to call it, has flown overboard. I like him. I think it's fair if you want Scotty Barnes over him for whatever reason. I understand the appeal of Scotty Barnes. But then I would just like to wrap up with this in terms of Kuminga. He has played within NBA regulations. He's played NBA regulated courts, NBA regulated shot clock against players who are far better than your average college player, by the way, because these are guys who have either previously played in the NBA, still plays in the NBA because they're on two-way contracts and they're coming up and down from the G League and into the league, or in some of the most competitive players who are trying to make it to the NBA. Whereas in college, a lot of these guys went up against someone who's going to be an accountant in 2 years. So you know what? That factors in from where I'm sitting. And I think the way that Jonathan Kuminga delivered at that level, I think people are sleeping on it. And fair, if he ends up being selected 6th or 7th, like, okay, sure. But I think this is a guy people should focus in on a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you think he would fit with, we have Fultz and Cole Anthony in the backcourt. You have Isaac when healthy at the 4. You've got the combo of Carter and Bamba at the 5. So they do have, Terrence Ross is coming off the bench, but like Chuma Okeke, I guess. But like, how do you see Kuminga fitting with the current core in Orlando, or similar to some of these other teams at the top? Should it just not matter?
Yeah, no, I don't think it should matter as much, but I do think he'll fit in well, just by sheer coincidence. Like, if he's there at 5, I think there's a reasonable chance he's the best player left on the board, and I think he could fit in well in Orlando next to Jonathan Isaac in that interchangeable forward role where, both can defend, both can pass a little bit. I think Kuminga actually projects as the better offensive player of the two, which, let's be honest, it's also going to be necessary because as much as I like Jonathan Isaac, that guy is not scoring the ball a whole lot. He is more of a defender and opportunistic scorer, whereas I think there is the potential for Kuminga to be more assertive. Not saying he's going to come in like Jalen Green and average 30. I don't think that's what we're seeing. I think we're looking at a guy who's going to come in and eventually be, a Luol Deng type of offensive contributor, if you catch my drift. Like, maybe 18 points per game when everything is said and done, but a very stellar diet of two-way play, rebounding, more playmaking. I like Kuminga. I think he would fit in there. I think he would fit in on most teams, to be honest with you, because who doesn't need a multi-purpose wing?
Right. That does seem to be in vogue these days. Do you think with 5 and 8, the Magic should try to trade up into that? I mean, they're not getting number 1 with that, but like should they try to get Mobley, or should they try to get Green or Suggs? Or should they just stand pat and take 2 swings?
If number 2 is there for 5 and 8, I do it.
For Mobley?
For Mobley. And if Mobley drops down to 3, then I also do it. Green and Suggs, I mean, they do need a guard. Like, I understand they have Markelle Fultz, but look, ACL tear. Well, I also know that they have Cole Anthony, but he came on strong at the second half of the year. He really did. Like, he was good. I don't think it's fair to use the first half of the season against him. But at the same time, you also just need someone who comes in and takes ownership, right? Whether that's a Jalen Suggs who comes in and is like a floor leader, or it's Jalen Green who comes in and goes, you know what, guys, you're all such great defenders. Let me take care of the offense. Like, whatever point you're leaving on the table, Jonathan Isaac, I can pick up. Maybe that's interesting, but would I give up 5 and 8 for like 4 to take Jalen Green if that's how everything turns? That's a steep price. I'm not ruling it out, but I'm certainly recognizing that that's a steep price. And I also think Orlando just needs talent. And if you spend 2 picks on one guy, I don't know for them specifically if that's the right course of action.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I feel like they will come up in the conversation of potential trade-ups just because of where they're positioned.
Yeah, but just by having 2 picks.
Yeah, exactly. And like 2 good picks.
Right.
We mentioned OKC. I think they'll also be mentioned just because they have a gazillion picks. Yeah. Golden State's the other team that I want to ask about in terms of a trade-up. Because they did get the Minnesota pick at number 7. They also have their own at 14. Given where they are, unlike Orlando, who is still kind of just rebuilding / like scrapping to maybe make the playoffs, you have Steph Curry, who's still phenomenal. You have Klay Thompson coming back from, basically 2 major injuries now at this point. You have Draymond Green. You have Wiseman, who you can dangle as well. So they're trying this thing the Celtics did for a couple of years where it's like you have your win now core and you might now have your young guys as well.
Right.
Do you think they should be willing to package 7 and 14 to move up? Wiseman was number 7 to get an impact player in. What do you think Golden State should do with those picks?
When you say move up, do you mean that the Golden State Warriors should actually actively move up in the draft and select a guy that they keep? Or do you just mean package with Wiseman and someone else maybe for a star?
Either or.
The last one. I wouldn't do the first one. That's a slap in the face to Steph Curry. Although, you know what's also a slap in the face to Steph Curry? Asking him to take a discount. I don't know if you saw that piece.
Yeah. For Joe Lacob. I don't know. I don't know if he meant it that way, but
okay.
He was
maybe not, but that was not a well put sentence. That was not one of that was a train wreck. But no, you owe it. You owe it to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green to go all in. I mean, I understand that you as an NBA organization have a responsibility to look to the long term. Nah, man, not this time around. You have a guy who just averaged 32 points per game. You have a guy who's going to come back who just off of his own shooting prowess is probably going to locked in for 18 points. You have Andrew Wiggins, who is playing the best ball of his career. That's not necessarily saying a lot, but it's a factor. Draymond is still somehow, some way the emotional center of your team. He's getting better than ever as a facilitator, by the way. He's still one of the most influential defenders in the entire league. Yeah, if you trade up for a guy and like a young guy and with the mindset of keeping him, that's rough. That's a rough look. I mean, just what happened last year with Wiseman, I was a little bit shocked. But you know what? Now's the time. Just package all those 2 picks, package Wiseman, maybe do something with a sign and trade Kelly Oubre, I don't know, something, and then get Pascal Siakam or someone of that ilk. No, that's because that's the player I kind of like in that scenario. Yeah. I like a Pascal Siakam, Draymond Green front court. It doesn't matter who starts at center. either or, and both can handle the ball, both can pass the ball. You're finally getting a guy who is a big man who's willing to take layups. Like that, that would be fun. That could be fun basketball.
Yeah. Golden State is definitely a team to be keeping an eye on heading into the draft as well, because they did not sound like they wanted to bring in. I mean, maybe they just take some guys who are like a bit older, don't necessarily have the star upside, but are like ready to contribute now. Maybe that's the way they do it. But it's all of the tone coming out of Golden State after the loss in the play-in tournament was, we want guys who can contribute like next season. We're not waiting on another James Wiseman.
Right, and I don't blame them.
No.